Hi, guys, and welcome to my podcast, 50 States of Crime. Since this is my first episode, I'm going to give a little rundown of what I am planning to do. So, I'm planning to go through a true crime case for each state. So, I'm going in alphabetical order, and Alabama is the first state. So, I am going to be talking about Bobby Frank Cherry and the 16th Street church bombing. So I actually wanted to get this out on the 15th for the anniversary of it, but I wanted to take my time and make sure that I did it right and had enough time to put into it. So Bobby Frank Cherry was born in June of 1930 in Mineral Springs, Alabama. I couldn't find much on his childhood, but in his early years, he was in the Marines and he was a demolitions expert for them. And it is said in an interview with his son that Bobby was hot-headed and stubborn, and he was known to, quote, fly into fits of rage, and he was always armed. He was often abusive towards his wife and children and commanded respect from them. His first wife and him had 7 children. The family did not have a lot of money, and this was during the desegregation period in the South, which was causing Bobby a lot of worry. He was concerned that his job would get taken by a black man if desegregation occurred, which is not making anything that he did right and is actually like horrible. Why don't you just be a better worker and then you don't have to worry about that? But nonetheless, these concerns led him to be even more aggressive, and he started having an open hatred for the black community. He joined the KKK, and it was said that he would display his robes outside of his closet so that his children could see, and he had KKK themed artwork throughout the home. He would also bring his oldest son with him to Klan meetings and events. And eventually, the KKK proved not violent enough for him, and he and some other men split off and started this group called the Cahaba Boys, which is named after the Cahaba River that they met at. This group would commit various violent acts against the black community, and they were known to carry weapons with them so that they could beat people that sat too close to the white section on the bus. So the weapons would be like pipes, chains. They would even hollow out baseball bats and fill them with lead, which is just absolutely disgusting. And then on top of that, they were known to kidnap and torture black people in the woods where they held their meetings, and to make and throw bombs into the driveways of black homes. They also said that Bobby was likely involved in the Gaston Motel bombing meant to kill Martin Luther King Jr. And on 2 occasions, Bobby shot at black families that were coming to his house trick-or-treating. Another story that his oldest son shared in that interview was that when he was a child, he had a newspaper route, and Bobby caught a young black man stealing the string for the newspapers, and he beat him senseless with a pipe. None of these crimes got him in trouble because it was just typical of the time, and there was nothing that you could really do about it. But their biggest crime was the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama. On the night before the bombing, it's suspected that Bobby, this guy Thomas Blanton, Robert Chambliss, and Herman Frank Cash planted a bomb that Bobby built in the normal KKK meeting spot nearby the church, and then they planted it on the church. And on September 15th, 1963, 5 young girls left their Sunday school early to go to the church and get ready for their service. And while they were in the ladies' lounge room in the basement, the bomb detonated on the other side of the wall and killed 4 of the girls and injured 20 other people. The surviving girl from the basement would call for her sister when the explosion happened, but never got any reply. These girls were so close to the explosion that the force decapitated one of them, left a brick lodged in the skull of another, and so badly maimed one that she was only identifiable through her shoes. The injured girl in the basement lost her right eye in the explosion, and her other eye was temporarily blinded. The damage from this explosion, which was 12 sticks of dynamite, stretched several blocks where windows were blown out blocks and blocks away. This, obviously, as it should, sparked immediate outrage and protests started in the city. Bobby and the other men were nearby with Bobby's son, and they quickly left after the bombing due to the chaos of the victims and witnesses. These protests turned violent when police arrived, and 2 black men were killed during them. Eventually, they had to call the National Guard to restore peace. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at a funeral held for 3 of the girls, which 8,000 people attended. This attack was so awful and hit so close to home that Martin Luther King Jr. personally wired President Kennedy demanding the FBI's assistance in solving these murders. The entire community was outraged, and it turned the tide of the civil rights movement, in the area, because, really once you start messing with children, people get involved. So people outside of the black community were starting to get just infuriated with this. It's sad that it took this for that to happen, but I guess it's good because it really helped the movement. And not that it's good, but you know what I mean. In a report on the incident, it was said that the FBI's evidence collection was, quote, in the report, haphazard at best. They didn't even recover any bomb fragments, so prosecutors could only speculate at the composition of the bomb. The FBI interviewed Bobby 20 times and never got a confession from him. He never admitted to any involvement, but he did tell detectives about his open racism and that he would have bombed the church if someone else hadn't done it first. He also said that even though he didn't do it, how he would execute the bombing, including the details of how to make the bomb. This included stating that he would go for the pastor, but the bombing was on Youth Day at the church. Coincidentally, or not, it was also the Sunday after a group of black children integrated to the white public school in Birmingham. The FBI eventually closed the case despite having no convictions. There's reason to believe that this is because the FBI director held racial sentiments at the time, and so he put a halt on the case and made sure that they didn't actually get anywhere with it. So Bobby's son said in an interview that Bobby and Virginia, his wife, would get into heated arguments that often turned violent. This would continue until Virginia's death from cancer. In 1977, the case was reopened and Bobby immediately moved to Texas. The FBI refused to give the lead detective any information they initially discovered until media threatened to write a story on their refusal and their lack of building a case in the first place. During this investigation, Robert Chambliss from earlier was successfully prosecuted and sentenced to life in prison, but he shortly died in the early 80s. During this time, Bobby held a press conference publicly denying any involvement, but this only made things worse for him as it caused multiple witnesses to come forward to tell investigators how Bobby bragged to them about the bombing. This included his granddaughter. Additionally, his ex-wife drove from Montana to give information to the FBI. The cases were reopened again in 1988 and 1997. Sometime after this, Bobby moved again to Henderson County, Texas, to live in the country because prior to that, he was living in Dallas, I believe, and people were starting to figure out who he was, and so he cut ties again and moved into the middle of nowhere. In the early 2000s, they were going to bring Bobby to trial, but there were questions of his competence due to the belief that he had dementia. So they put him into a mental institution for 2 months, and it was determined that Bobby was faking his illness, and he went to trial. So by faking his illness, they knew this. The psychiatrists and psychologists knew this because when he was in his room alone and didn't know they were surveying him, he would act completely competent and he knew what was going on. And like when he talked with his lawyers and stuff. But when he was under the supervision, the knowing supervision of the employees at the mental institution, he would act like he didn't know where he was and like he had dementia. During the trial, 2 key witnesses, the ex-wife and the granddaughter, were deemed not credible sources as an ex-spouse has motive to lie, and it's rumored that Bobby sexually abused his granddaughter, which would give her motive to lie as well. Luckily, a tape used in Thomas Blanton's trial in 2001 gave them the evidence they needed. Blanton and his wife mentioned that they met at the Modern Sign Company to make the bomb. Back in 1963, during an interview with detectives, Bobby said he was at the Modern Sign Company the same night, preparing for a motorcade protest. He also said the men with him that night were the convicted Robert and Tommy. So finally, in 2002, Bobby was convicted. Quickly after that, though, he did die. And unfortunately, the other guy, Herman Frank Cash, died before he could ever be brought to trial. So good job, FBI, because pretty much all of these guys got off pretty easy because as soon as they went to prison, they kicked it. They died. So that's the story of Bobby Frank Cherry and the 16th Street bombing in Birmingham. I didn't mention any of the names of the victims because they were children when they died, and I just think it's kind of disrespectful to do that, especially since I'm not really getting permission before I'm making this. So if you have any more interest in it, please leave a comment, and I'd love to hear your theories and thoughts about it. And if you have any cases that you're particularly interested in, maybe I'll make them the case for that state. Our next state is Alaska, so keep an eye out for that. I am doing my, I guess you'd call it a podcast on YouTube, and then I'm also going to do like shortened preview versions on TikTok. Both of those are 50 States of Crime. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time.